In a world of polished marble and silk, a billionaire heiress found her heart not in a boardroom, but in the warm, seasoned hands of her chef. Their love was a recipe her parents called disgusting, but to her, it was the only thing that truly tasted like home. The world knew Adesewa Adekola as the silk and steel heiress, a title as meticulously crafted as the public persona she maintained. At 25, her life was a curated gallery of modern Nigerian opulence, her every appearance a strategic blend of effortless elegance and formidable intelligence. Her Ikoyi penthouse was her sanctuary, a breathtaking architectural poem where the clean, sharp lines of contemporary design were softened by the soul of Nigeria. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating floating staircases of rich Irako wood and walls that served as a canvas for vibrant, storytelling tapestries by Nike Davies Okunde. Here, amidst plush velvet sofas and the gentle glow of pendant lights crafted from intricate Aso oak fabric, she could almost forget the weight of the Adekola Empire resting on her shoulders. Her wardrobe, a symphony of bespoke dresses from designers like Lisa Falawiyo and Makio, was another layer of her armor, each piece a testament to a status that was both her birthright and her gilded cage. The beating heart of this domestic masterpiece was the kitchen, and its undisputed ruler was Emeka Anyanwu. At 35, Emeka was a culinary artist whose soul was seasoned with a quiet passion and profound patience. Outside his domain, he was a man of simple, grounded comforts, often found in soft, well-worn cotton t-shirts and jeans. But inside it, he transformed into a general in a crisp, white chef's jacket, commanding his brigade of copper pans and indigenous spices with an artist's focus. He understood the subtle magic of uziza, the comforting warmth of a perfectly spiced jollof rice, and could deconstruct a classic ofansala into an airy foam that would dazzle the most jaded palate. Their story did not begin with a grand declaration, but with the quiet, consistent rhythm of daily nourishment. Adesewa, who merely picked at canapes at lavish parties, found herself genuinely looking forward to the beautiful, thoughtful plates Emeka created just for her. He, in turn, noticed the way her eyes lit up at the scent of fresh utazi and began incorporating it into light, citrusy salads. He saw the faint lines of stress on her brow after a long board meeting and would silently place a small pot of ginger and turmeric tea beside the cold, impersonal Italian coffee machine. A silent symphony of care was being composed between them, note by careful note, in the warm, aromatic air of the kitchen. The symphony of their unspoken understanding found its first, clear note on a rain-lashed Lagos evening. The penthouse was silent, save for the rhythmic percussion of water against the panoramic windows. Adesewa had dismissed her assistant hours ago, the weight of a potential merger. A deal that would cement her father's legacy but felt like a chain around her own neck, pressing down on her. She wandered from her minimalist home office, its sleek surfaces feeling sterile and cold, drawn by the one place in the vast apartment that always held warmth. The kitchen was bathed in the soft, golden glow of the Aso oak pendant lights, a stark contrast to the stormy darkness outside. Emeka was there, as he often was late into the night, perfecting a new recipe. His broad back was to her, his focus absolute on a small saucepan where a dark, glossy ganache simmered. The air was rich with the scent of dark chocolate and something else, something uniquely his, a faint, comforting aroma of nutmeg and patience. He didn't need to turn. He sensed her presence, a shift in the room's energy. "The rain is something else tonight," he said, his voice a low rumble that harmonized with the storm. "It is," Adesewa replied, her voice softer than usual, stripped of its corporate crispness. She leaned against the cool granite of the kitchen island, watching the efficient, graceful movements of his hands. "What's that smell?" "Captivating. A new nutmeg-infused chocolate ganache," he said, finally turning to glance at her. His eyes, warm and intelligent, took her in, the elegant, dark silk dress she still wore from her evening meetings, the slight droop of her shoulders, the vulnerability she allowed no one else to see. "I'm testing it. For the new dessert menu." He turned back to his work, lifting the spoon from the pot. Perfect, glossy droplet clung to its tip. Without a second thought, an impulse born from their months of quiet camaraderie. He turned back to her and offered it. Here, tell me if it's too bitter. The space between them seemed to contract, the world outside the kitchen fading into insignificance. Adesawa didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, closing the small distance, and leaned in. Her lips, untouched by the bold lipstick she usually wore, parted softly and closed over the tip of his finger. The taste was sublime, deep, complex chocolate, cut through with the warm, enigmatic spice of nutmeg. It was a taste of comfort and creativity, a taste of him. But more potent than the flavor was the contact. The brief, electric warmth of his skin against her lips, the slight roughness of a small burn on his knuckle, the startling intimacy of the act. She leaned back, her eyes, wide and unguarded, locking with his. A faint, shimmering trace of chocolate remained on her bottom lip. "It's perfect," she whispered, the words carrying a weight far beyond a culinary critique. In the silence that followed, the unspoken symphony between them swelled into a crescendo. The space where her lips had touched his finger seemed to burn. It was the first crack in the dam, a silent acknowledgement that the carefully maintained boundary between the heiress in her silk and the artist in his whites had just been irrevocably crossed. The crack in the dam became a flood. In the days that followed the night of the ganache, a new, charged energy hummed between them. The silent symphony now had a melody, one of stolen glances that lasted a heartbeat too long, and of hands that almost, but not quite, touched when passing a salt cellar or a sprig of fresh basil. Adesawa found herself inventing reasons to be in the kitchen, her elegant dresses feeling less like armor and more like a costume she was eager to shed in the one place she felt truly seen. The floodgates finally opened on a night when Lagos was alight with a million electric stars. Adesawa had just endured a grueling charity gala, a 3-hour performance of smiling and small talk that had left her soul feeling thin and stretched. She retreated to her private sitting room, a sanctuary designed for quiet contemplation. The room was a masterpiece of modern Nigerian serenity. Cool terrazzo floors underfoot, walls draped in hand-dyed indigo attire that evoked the deep night sky, and a single low-slung sofa in a rich, earthy brown velvet. She had just kicked off her heels and was standing by the window, tracing the glittering skyline with a tired gaze, when a soft knock came at the door. "It's open," she said, her voice weary. Emeka entered, holding a small tray. He was out of his chef's whites, clad in his simple, soft gray cotton t-shirt and dark jeans. He looked solid, real, an anchor in her world of shifting social currents. "I thought you might need this," he said, his voice a quiet balm. On the tray was a cup of his ginger turmeric tea and a small, perfect square of the nutmeg ganache. A little of the good stuff to counter the bad. A smile, genuine and unforced, touched her lips for the first time all evening. "You read my mind." He set the tray down on a bamalik stool beside her. As he straightened, his eyes met hers, and the air in the room grew thick and warm. The pretense, the carefully maintained distance, it all seemed suddenly absurd. "Adesawa," he began, her name a prayer on his lips. That was all it took. She stepped into him, her hands coming up to cradle his jaw, her thumbs tracing the strong, familiar line of it. He stilled for a moment, a statue of surprise and longing, before his arms came around her, pulling her flush against him. The soft cotton of his t-shirt was a welcome roughness against the slick silk of her slip dress. The first kiss was not one of frantic passion, but of profound relief. It was a homecoming. It tasted of ginger, of dark chocolate, and of a truth they had both been too afraid to name. His hands, those capable, calloused hands that could wield a knife with precision, were impossibly gentle as they slid down her back, drawing her closer. Later, wrapped in the safety of his arms on the velvet sofa, the city lights painting shifting patterns on the ceiling, the last of her defenses crumbled. His t-shirt was soft beneath her cheek, the steady, strong beat of his heart a rhythm more comforting than any music. Her elegant dress was a puddle of fabric on the terrazzo floor, a discarded skin. In that room, surrounded by the beautiful modern heart of Nigeria, they were no longer the heiress and the chef. They were simply Suwa and Emeka, The intimacy they shared was more than a physical union. It was the quiet, seismic shift of two souls recognizing their other half. The heart's kitchen, long closed off and sterile, was now open, warm, and filled with a feast only they could share. The sanctuary of Adesua's penthouse, once a haven of scented air and soft whispers, was shattered by the shrill, impersonal ring of the landline. A line reserved for one purpose only. The sound was a cold splash of reality, and Adesua felt Amika's arm tighten around her. She answered, her father's voice, clipped and devoid of warmth, delivering a single command. Your mother and I will see you at the house. Now, the drive to the Eco-Atlantic mansion was a blur. The vibrant, chaotic energy of Lagos seemed muted, the colorful Danfo buses and bustling markets fading into a gray haze. The Adekola residence stood as a stark, cold sentinel against the ocean, a monument to minimalist ambition where art was chosen for its investment value, not its soul. The interior was a study in imported marble, chrome, and vast, empty spaces that echoed with silence. Her parents were waiting in the formal living room, a space so sterile it felt surgical. Her mother, a vision in a stiff, brocaded asoke gown that cost more than most annual salaries, did not even let her fully cross the threshold. We have heard the most vile, the most disturbing rumors, Adesua, she began, her voice a low, sharp hiss. She looked her daughter up and down as if inspecting a contaminated specimen. Whispers that you have been fraternizing with the kitchen help, that you have let that cook put his common hands on you. The word cook was spat out like a piece of rotten meat, deliberately stripping Emeka of his artistry, his title, his humanity. Before Adesua could form a defense, her father stood, his presence a cold wall of authority. Let us be perfectly clear, Adesua. This infatuation ends today. It is a disgusting thing, a lapse in judgment so profound it threatens not just your reputation, but this entire family's standing. He's not a lapse in judgment. Adesua finally found her voice, hot and fierce. His name is Emeka. He is a brilliant, good man, and I love him. Her mother let out a short, bitter laugh. Love? Do not be naive. What could you possibly have in common with a man who smells of stock and sweat? What kind of life is that? Scrubbing pots with him in some hovel? This discussion is not about love, her father interjected, his tone final. It is about legacy. You will marry Tund Okafor's son, Deli. The arrangement has been understood for years. It merges our interests, it secures our future. This filth with the kitchen staff is an embarrassment that will be erased. The fight that followed was volcanic. Adesua screamed, her voice raw, pleading for them to see the man, not his profession. She argued for her happiness, for her right to choose, her words bouncing off the cold, hard surfaces of the room. But the weight of $1 billion legacy, of generations of expectation, was a mountain on her spirit. Their arguments were not rebuttals, but decrees. The steel in her father's eyes was harder than any she possessed. Defeated, hollowed out, she watched from her penthouse window the next day as a black sedan pulled up. Emeka emerged, not in his chef's whites, but in his simple t-shirt and jeans, carrying a single duffel bag. He was met by her father's chief of security. There was a brief, tense exchange. She saw Amika's shoulders, usually so straight and proud, slump in a way that broke her heart. He was handed a white envelope. He opened it, glanced at its contents, and without a word, tore it in two, letting the pieces fall to the ground like dead leaves. He didn't look up at her window. He just got into a waiting taxi and disappeared into the Lagos traffic, leaving the torn shreds of his severance behind. A proud, painful testament to what her family had thrown away. The society pages declared it the wedding of the decade. Adesua Adekola, now Adesua Okafor, was a vision in ivory, her gown a breathtaking masterpiece of French lace and hand-embroidered Nigerian pearl motifs. The ceremony was a spectacle of unimaginable wealth, held in a grand hall draped in the most luxurious Dutch wax prints, the air thick with the scent of imported orchids and old money. In every photograph, she was the picture of a perfect bride, her smile a triumph of meticulous choreography. But behind the dazzle of the diamond choker at her throat, her eyes were hollow, reflecting nothing. Her new home in Banana Island was a gilded cage. A stark, sprawling monument of glass and steel. It was the antithesis of her warm Ikoyi penthouse. The interior was a study in cold, minimalist perfection. Polished chrome, stark white walls, and sharp-angled Italian furniture that looked as uncomfortable as it was expensive. There were no vibrant Nike Davies Okunde tapestries here, no hand-woven Bamalik stools or the soft glow of Osso oak lights. This was a space designed for display, not for living. Her husband, Deli, was not a cruel man, but he was a disinterested one. He viewed their union with the detached satisfaction of a CEO finalizing a successful merger. Their conversations were sterile boardroom briefings. His golf handicap, her upcoming charity galas, the quarterly performance of their merged stock portfolios. Intimacy, when it occurred, was a scheduled, transactional affair, as cold and impersonal as the polished concrete floors beneath their king-sized bed. In the vast, silent bedroom with its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the endless Atlantic, Adesawa would lie awake, the loneliness a physical weight on her chest. She tried to lose herself in her role, chairing the Adekla Foundation with a polished efficiency that made her parents proud. But every project, every ribbon cutting, felt like an empty pantomime. The elegant dresses that once made her feel powerful now felt like the uniforms of a prisoner playing a lifelong part. At night, the memory of Amika's laughter in her sun-drenched kitchen would ambush her. The feel of his strong, steadying hands, the taste of his food, made with something more than just ingredients. It was a ghost that haunted the sterile corridors of her new life, a bittersweet reminder of a love her parents had called disgusting, and that her soul now recognized as its only true home. The gilded cage held her for a year of smiling through charity luncheons where the conversation was as flavorless as the poached salmon. A year of lying beside Deli in the cavernous bedroom, listening to the hum of the air conditioning that could never quite dispel the chill. The elegant dresses felt less like uniforms and more like burial shrouds, each silk thread a tie binding her to a life that was slowly suffocating her spirit. The memory of Emika, once a sharp, painful wound, had dulled into a constant, aching presence, a phantom limb of her happiness. The reckoning arrived not with a bang, but during another one of Deli's interminable dinner parties. The table was a masterpiece of minimalist chic: white porcelain, single-stem orchids, chilled white wine. Deli was holding forth on the strategic merits of their latest acquisition, a chain of boutique hotels. His voice was a smooth, confident monotone. Adesawa sat perfectly still, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, picking at the artistically drizzled sauce on her plate. She looked across the table, her gaze traveling from Deli's smug face to the equally polished, vacuous faces of their guests. She saw the next 20, 30, 40 years of her life unfolding in that moment. A series of identical parties, identical conversations, a slow, graceful descent into a living death of quiet desperation. The hollow echo in her chest, which she had learned to ignore, swelled into a deafening roar. It was the sound of her own soul screaming for release. Peace was not something to be negotiated or begged for. It was not a commodity to be acquired in a merger. It was a state of being she had once known, and it had to be seized. The next morning, she walked into Deli's home office. The sun, sharp and clear, reflected off the chrome of his desk. He looked up, a faint smile on his lips, expecting a question about the weekend's social calendar. "I'm leaving you, Deli," she said, her voice unnervingly calm, devoid of the tremor she felt in her bones. "I want a divorce." The media circus that followed was predictable and brutal. The headlines screamed, "Silk and Steel Heiress shatters power couple," and "Adekla Okafor merger collapses." Her parents descended upon her, their fury a toxic storm. Her mother called her ungrateful, a destroyer of legacies, a foolish girl throwing away a kingdom for a fantasy. Her father was colder, his disappointment a weapon. "You are spitting on generations of work, Adesawa. For what?" But the silk and steel heiress had, in the fire of her misery, forged a new, purer core of steel within herself. Their words, which had once commanded her obedience, now glanced off her newfound resolve. She did not scream or plead. She simply stood her ground. She engaged a ruthless lawyer, and with a steely determination that surprised even herself, she walked away. She took only what was legally hers before the marriage: her investments, her properties, the deed to her beloved, empty Ikoyi penthouse. It was the most terrifying and liberating decision of her life. She was trading a gilded cage for an uncertain future, but it was a future that was, for the first time, entirely her own. Freedom, Adesuwa quickly learned, was a strange and quiet thing. Without the structure of society events and the constant scrutiny, her days felt both vast and intimidating. The Ikoyi penthouse, once a sanctuary, now echoed with a profound silence. It was a beautiful shell, waiting for a soul to be poured back into it, and she knew there was only one person who could help her do that. Finding him was her first mission, a quest that gave purpose to her newfound liberty. It was not easy. Emeka had vanished from the world of private service, wiped clean by the Adekola influence. But Adesuwa was relentless. She used skills honed in boardrooms to follow faint trails: a whisper from a former supplier, a hint from a culinary school contact. The trail led her to a trendy, artsy strip in Lekki, far from the cold marble of Banana Island. The place was called Udo. Peace. The name was etched in simple, elegant script on a reclaimed wood sign. Her breath hitched. The supper club was intimate, tucked away behind a courtyard strung with fairy lights. Through the large window, she could see an open kitchen, its backdrop a wall painted with a modern, minimalist interpretation of Uli art, the ancient Igbo body designs. And there he was, Emeka. His back was to the door, his focus on a sizzling pan, but she would know the set of those shoulders anywhere. He wasn't in a chef's white, but in a simple, dark t-shirt, a long apron tied around his waist. He looked older, a little more weathered, but the quiet intensity was the same. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed the door open. The air was alive with the most incredible aromas: smoky suya, fragrant rosemary, and something rich and nutty she couldn't place. A few diners looked up, but she had eyes only for him. He must have felt the shift in the room. He turned. Time stopped. His eyes, those warm, intelligent eyes she had dreamed of for a year, widened in sheer, unvarnished shock. The spatula in his hand stilled. The noise of the kitchen, the chatter of the guests, it all faded into a dull hum. Adesuwa stood her ground, dressed not in silk, but in simple, expensive linen trousers and a cream-colored blouse. She was just a woman now, not an heiress, just Suwa. She took a tentative step forward. "I was an idiot," she said, her voice clear but trembling with the weight of the admission. He slowly set the spatula down, wiping his hands on a cloth, his gaze never leaving hers. A lifetime seemed to pass in that single look. "Yes," he said, his voice low and even. "You were. I left him," she continued, her throat tight. "I left everything. The marriage, the name, all of it. I know." A flicker of a smile, bittersweet and weary, touched the corners of his eyes. "I read it in the papers. The scandalous split of the silk and steel heiress." The old title sounded like an insult from a past life. She took another step, now just a few feet from him, close enough to see the faint lines of fatigue and resilience around his eyes. "Am I too late?" The question was a raw, vulnerable plea, stripped of all pride. He didn't answer with words. He moved then, walking out from behind the stainless steel counter, past the curious glances of his staff and patrons. He stopped in front of her, and his hands, the ones that had created 1,000 meals and once held her with such tenderness, came up to cradle her face. They smelled of garlic, of wood smoke, and of a hope she thought she had lost forever. He looked deep into her eyes, his own shimmering with a mixture of old pain and a dawning impossible joy. "Never," he whispered, and in that single word, spoken in the warm, aromatic heart of his sanctuary, Adesuwa Adekola finally, truly, came home. Their wedding was not a society event. It was a quiet, sun-drenched celebration held in the courtyard of her Ikoyi penthouse, the space now feeling lived in and joyful. There were no glossy magazine photographers, no guest list of corporate titans. Instead, the air was filled with the laughter of a small, cherished circle. A few of Adesuwa's true friends who had stood by her, and Emika's family and comrades from the culinary world, their warmth a tangible force. She wore not a European gown, but a stunning, custom-designed dress made from a radiant, deep blue Adire fabric. Its patterns echoing the waves of the Atlantic she could now view with peace, not dread. He wore a simple, well-tailored navy suit, looking more comfortable and himself than she had ever seen him. The feast was Emika's masterpiece, a culinary narrative of their journey. There were playful amuse-bouches that recalled the first delicate tastes Head made for her, a rich, smoky suya that spoke of his triumph at Udo, and a central dish of perfectly prepared fish in a spicy, comforting pepper broth that tasted of Lagos, of home, of resilience. It was a celebration not of a merger, but of a fusion, two distinct lives and cultures blending into something uniquely beautiful and strong. Peace was no longer an abstract concept. It was the scent of Emika's jollof rice simmering on their stove, the sound of his deep laughter mingling with hers as they debated which Nollywood film to watch, their feet tangled together on the plush velvet sofa. It was the feeling of his t-shirt-clad chest against her cheek as they slow-danced in the middle of the living room for no reason at all. The penthouse was no longer a silent gallery. It was a home, vibrating with life, love, and the soulful aroma of good food. And happiness? Happiness was their daughter, little Nemdi, a cherubic 1-year-old with her father's observant, warm eyes and her mother's delicate, defiant chin. The nursery, once a guest room, was now a sanctuary of soft earth tones, a mobile of carved wooden birds spinning lazily above the crib. As Adesuwa rocked her there, humming an old song, she would watch Emika move through their home. Sometimes Head be scribbling a new recipe idea at the kitchen island. Other times Head come in, his hands still smelling of onions and thyme, to drop a kiss on her forehead and then Nemdis. The world outside had not entirely vanished. Her parents, though still distant, had sent a delicate silver rattle when Nemdi was born. It was not an apology, but it was a small, silent truce, an acknowledgement of a lineage that continued despite their disapproval. But Adesuwa no longer needed their approval, nor did she crave the hollow accolades of her past life. She had traded a gilded cage for a kingdom built on the simplest, most profound foundations. She had learned that the most exquisite life did not require marble or chrome, nor was it found in the pages of a society magazine. It was cooked on a humble stove, seasoned with patience and passion, and shared with the one who knew the true, unvarnished flavor of her soul. Emika had been right all along. The main ingredient had always been love.